Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time of day it may be for you. In today's video, we're going to go into some of the structures of the face, the larger structures, the zygomatic bone, the orbicularis region, and a little bit of stuff here for the forehead. So remember, yesterday we put in some more information for the lips, so we're looking at the smaller forms and the subforms for the lips. Today we're going to look at some of the larger structures. So let's get another brush here. Kind of a really used up brush. But let's go ahead and take a look at the cheekbone structure. Notice how we kind of mapped out this little division here earlier in the poster image. So this just means that this area here is darker. And it's darker because it is facing away from the light. Right about there is where the structure of the cheekbone is turning furthest away from us. And again, I'm still using the same colors. So it's just Winsor Newton Raw Umber and Williamsburg Flake White. See how with very simple and clean gradation we're starting to get this form to appear like it's turning away from us. Now we're going to work our way towards the mandible. The mandible region here is going to actually pick up a little more light. And this is a section of the portrait that I usually don't have enough time to talk about. And I didn't have enough time in my older videos back when I was only uploading once a week. So what's going on here is that there's a little overlap of form. So lighter, darker, lighter, darker. That's what I mean by overlap. And this kind of stuff can take a while to get just right. So that's why I like to create these monochromatic underpaintings before getting too far with the values. That is, I like to do these underpaintings so that when the time comes to transition into color, most of these larger structures are worked out. So I'm still kind of moving back and forth. So I'm making this whole plane change darker, but again, there's a subform here. That is the area surrounding the mandible, this area here that's going to be picking up light. Very subtle, however. So we gotta keep track of our subforms. And again, a subform just means all of this was one chop, right? Just one plane change. And then we added in a little extra light here. So that is, this is the subform resting in this larger form, which is this plane change. And this value cannot get as light as the values in this area here of the cheekbone, because this whole area is in a different space and a different angle in relation to the mandible, meaning this subform here. Now, making the portrait or making any of the features look realistic, it's really down to your understanding of these concepts. So again, pushing this a little bit darker. A little darker even still over here. Now, as we move our way down towards the Orbicularis oris, there's going to be another plane change here. So we want to start off with this large plane change. And then we're going to add in some subforms. And notice how we're kind of moving from the darks into the lights. It doesn't always have to be that way. Right over here, it's getting darker. And I'll tell you what, one of the best ways to get acclimated to studying form in this way is through cast drawing or cast painting. So if you're taking a class somewhere and they have you spending like a month or something on a cast drawing a plaster cast, that's going to help you a lot. I know it might not be a lot of fun, but once you learn how to observe form, it really does help you with, especially with the portrait. So here we're now at the side of the Orbicularis oris. That is the structure that's encompassing the mouth. So it's going to get a little bit, darker around here. Try not to lose the structure that we painted for the mouth. By the way, everything is still wet. You're watching this in the future, actually, because I've been filming all day the same day, getting the features, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So the reason I chopped up this video into several sections to play throughout the week is so that I don't overwhelm you with so much information. At least I read in one of the comments that someone liked that I was putting in smaller, more digestible segments. Alright, so as we move towards the bottom of the chin, it's going to get darker as the plane is turning away from the light. But then, of course, we're over modeling here, meaning we're making it too dark. You gotta push that light back. Now let's talk about the subforms around this section. So remember, this is another plane change, but now there's a subform there. So an area that's picking up a little bit more light. But now we're starting to run into problems. I don't want it to be confused. So I don't want this value to get anywhere near these values. But it still needs to be lighter. So that's a little better. A little darker here. So as I've been saying for the past couple days now, making something look three-dimensional, getting that illusion of form can be a very tricky and elusive thing. And having a way to go about it that's coherent really is going to be a great advantage. So right about here, I'm noticing there's a little bit more light down here. So for the Orbicularis oris, this whole section here, it's going to actually be turning away from the light, almost like a cylinder. A little bit more light here. And I'll show you what I mean. So a cylinder, think about this little tube here. So this is a cylinder, right? Turning away from the light here, turning away from the light here, and then facing the light here. So conceptually, that's the same kind of thing that we're going to look for right around here. So very carefully now, we're going to start to add in this value as the light turns away. So starting off with a large plane change first. Then we'll add the subforms. Just like the cylinder. Again, this is analogous to this area here. This is analogous to this area here, turning away from the light. Now, it's alright if we over-model a little bit in the underpainting, meaning make a value too dark, like I probably just did there, because we'll be able to come back in with much more specificity in the color pass. So that is basically the large plane. Now let's look at some of the subforms. So it's going to get, now it's very hard to see on the photograph, nearly impossible to see, so we have to conceptualize it. So it's going to get a little bit lighter here because this area is going to be facing the light more. So just underneath the cast shadow right here, it's going to get a little lighter. A little bit lighter. Kind of accidentally sharpened the cast shadow from the nose, so let's go ahead and fix that. It's a little better. Okay, so now the other side is going to be turning away from the light as well. But I don't want to overgeneralize it either. So it's going to turn away from the light a little bit here. And again, we're still talking about the Orbicularis oris. Now there's going to be a lot of compression in the value range for the cheeks. And you know what happens when we compress the value range, right? We introduce subtlety, and the subtlety is what we want. It's going to get darker near here. So I'm starting to notice that the outline might be a little too far to the left here. So I'm going to put in this little dark shape first. Then we'll correct that. So we're going to correct it with our drawing color. I'm going to add a little bit of Neo-Megilp medium. And again, if you're new to this channel and you're curious as to what materials I'm using, you can always scroll down to the description box below and it'll all be typed up for you. So this is going to be a very careful line, so I'm going to use this to support my hand. So I'm just pushing that line inwards a little bit because her face was a little too wide there. And while we're at it, we might as well look at this shape too. Okay, that's a little better, I hope. So now then, this whole section here is going to be turning away from the light. This whole thing is going to be a plane change. And I'm aware that I just softened that edge, but that's actually what I wanted. That worked out. Doesn't always happen that way. Now the cheekbone, the top region, so the top plane is going to be right over here. So first thing we're going to do is just put it in as a large plane, and then we'll get into the subforms. Zygomatic bone goes all the way back there. So that is the large plane for the top plane of the cheekbone. Now let's look at some subforms. There's going to be a little form right here. So this is actually the, I think this is the highlight of the zygomatic region. I'm going to use the fan brush to eliminate some glare. Another subform that I'm noticing is going to be, I need another brush for this, very subtle. I'm going to use a little bit of Neo-Megilp. Very subtle. No, that's too light. I get a little bit darker here. And this is a subform because it's resting on top of this larger form. And this cannot get as dark as anything here. Now then, of course, the edge is going to be kind of a thing. So this edge here we want to soften. And we're going to look at the top plane of the cheekbone on the other side as well. It's very, very hard to see on the photo reference. That would be the top plane of the cheekbone structure. So now we'll move on to the forehead. So right around here, there's going to be a plane change, a larger plane change. We're kind of exaggerating that plane change a little bit, just so that we can come back in and put in a clean gradation of tone. Very clean gradation of tone here. It's going to get darker here as it turns away from the light. So right now we're looking at three major planes: front plane, side plane, side plane. And then we'll get into the subforms. We're just adding a little more specificity to these planes before we throw in the subforms. Let's just soften the edges between them. Alright, so let's look at some of the subforms now. So there's going to be a lighter plane here following this arch. I think this is called, hold on a second. So this is the superciliary arch. Had to look up the name, kind of just forgot it. I also forgot it when I was, so if you follow me on my Instagram, you know that I'm teaching a portrait class in Howard County, Maryland. So funny thing is that same structure, I was demonstrating it in a drawing in my class, and I forgot the same thing. superciliary arch, this little portion of the skull right here. And we're also seeing a little bit of it over here. And again, this is a subform being added on top of a larger form. I'm also teaching that class again in the spring, potentially in the summer. So if you live in the Howard County area in Maryland, United States, you are more than welcome to be in my class. I really hope that I can travel and teach workshops in the future. I really, really want to do that. So if your local art school or atelier wants me to come and teach a workshop, let me know. I'd be more than willing. So now we're putting in that subform for the superciliary arch. And I think that the frontal bone, we're also seeing a little bit of it here as a little highlight. See that little highlight there on the photo reference? But barely, we're barely seeing it. So we're kind of trying to go beyond the grasp of the photo reference. And by the way, in the class that I'm teaching, we're working from live models, so it's a little bit easier to demonstrate the structures when you can just walk up and point at them. So now we're starting to close in on the forms. So again, we don't want to lose this large form. I'm just softening this little edge now. Try to get the curvature, the frontal bone. Just making this value a little bit lighter, but still trying to keep it darker than, say, this area. Now for the cheekbone structure, the zygomatic, we're going to revisit the plane, the shape of this plane a little bit. So the nature of it's actually kind of sharper in this direction. Don't want to do too much to that, however. I'm going to use my fan brush to soften the edges this time. Let's get an intermediate value here, just to soften this edge now. I'm going to add a little subform here, a little bit darker. think just 3 more edges to work out. So one here, and then one there. So with an intermediate value, I'm just softening the edges. So that ought to do it for this one. Now with the lighter intermediate value, I'm going to soften this one. I think that's all right. Just about the same value, I think. I'm going to soften this one. Okay, maybe just one more edge. Just going to soften this one. All right. So that ought to do it for the structure of the cheekbone and the Orbicularis oris, as well as some of the structures for the forehead. So I really hope that this video helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I will see you again tomorrow.